everybody, and welcome to this episode of a run through. So today I'm taking a look at Windbound. It's available on, I believe, Switch. I think it's on everything, but I know it's on Switch and I believe PS4, PC. It's on Steam and Epic. It's around $30. If you're a humble subscriber, you can get it for around $24, I think, which is what I end up paying. And this is a really, I'm having a lot of trouble trying to get some opinions on this. And I think a lot of people are. It's sort of sitting in a mixed review on Steam at the moment. And it's another one of those games where I feel like overall it's a maybe. Because the game kind of struggles, I think, with what it is really trying to be as a game. You sort of have this. It's almost a roguelike, which is already kind of odd, and not necessarily bad, because I personally enjoy those quite a bit, but that was not at all really what I was anticipating this game being, and it is it's a third-person adventure game in the survival genre, with crafting and stuff like that. It obviously is going to get a lot of similarities to Breath of the Wild, just based on, aesthetic, and then a lot of the movement stuff. It definitely does not feel anywhere near as good as that game does to play by any means. There is a loose quality to Breath of the Wild and a speed to that game that I think really suits it. And I think by virtue of them trying to, maybe once they showed it, they sort of got that negativity and or that comparison, and they sort of tried to maybe break away from it a little bit. But I think it's a disservice to the game itself by doing that, because it seems like they sort of took that and changed they changed some aspects of it that I don't think are in service of the actual gameplay itself. Like, For one, whenever you pick up any resource, you have to bend down and actually pick it up, which takes a second, which kind of hinders the flow of the game itself, which isn't so bad. But again, if you're comparing, I wouldn't necessarily want to compare this to Breath of the Wild, but as you can see, even right there with pulling out a glider and stuff, the comparisons are pretty remarkable. So it's I want to build as a different game, but they've clearly been inspired heavily by that game, so I sort of have to compare it to that. I would say overall gameplay, I think it's a lot more similar to Flame in the Flood, if you've played that game before. It's maybe closer to that, but it takes a lot from Breath of the Wild. It would be like Breath of the Flood or something, maybe to give a better moniker, but and it takes a few things from Wind Waker as well. I don't know. So getting into the actual game itself. So basically, you're stranded on an island. Your ship initially capsizes, and then you're put onto an island where you need to build a canoe and then go to the next island, and so on and so forth. There are two gameplay modes to this. There's the story mode, and then I can't remember the name of it, but it's basically the roguelike mode, where if you die, you lose everything with the exception of what is in your bag right there is the held items, and everything else you lose. And I believe you lose your bag as well. You just have the 7 held slots, and that's it. So that's a little weird too, especially because the combat itself is not really that refined. It wasn't really until I found the bow that the combat felt worthwhile, and even then it's still, I wouldn't say, quite where it needs to be. When you're doing traditional melee combat, you have a dodge, and then you have a single attack. It's not like a 3-hit combo or a 2-hit or light heavy, anything like that. You have a target, so you have dodge and you have 1 hit. That's it. And I think it is a huge disservice to the flow of the game and the desire to actually engage with the combat, because it doesn't feel very much. It doesn't feel good really in any capacity. If you get an opening, you only get an opening for 1 hit, and then you have to back out, roll out of the way, do some other stuff like that. and you're also animation locked as well. So when you're doing that one hit, you can't dodge mid roll if you need to. The crafting stuff as well. Everything you craft, you sit down and actually manually craft. So if you're in a fight and you have to craft like another arrow, or you have to do a spear or something like that, because everything in the game degrades, then it just takes you out of it again. And so it's almost better to, you have to go into every fight really prepared, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I would say the combat is sort of like a very, very dumbed down version of, say, Horizon Zero Dawn, more or less. Just in the way that there's like a lock on, there's like a thing, but even in that game you had more of a melee combo if you needed it, but you're generally focusing on your like weapons and tool set. I haven't found any. I found one poison grenade, and then you could make more of them, but other than that I haven't found any other, like, you have like a slingshot, your spear, and then eventually you find a bow, which pretty much makes the slingshot useless after that point, or at least I hadn't found another use for it. And so that being said, but yeah, it didn't really get into feeling worthwhile until I could stand far away and just shoot at a thing, and then it was like, okay, well, I can get the resource I want, and then I'm out. Another problem with the resource gathering and stuff like that is you don't really get many. Usually everything is a single pickup, so it's like you get one rock. If you pull out an entire bushel of grass, you get one grass, one stick from a thing. I thought that would change when you find, because it wasn't until, and so I know this is a little all over the place, but I'm trying to, it's just there's so many things that are sort of hinder on another thing that sort of make it difficult to kind of put together, because the game is just kind of disjointed all over the place. So I didn't find an axe, like a proper axe to cut down trees until about 3.5 hours in. I don't know if that's ordinary or if that is by virtue, or until the 3rd chapter, I guess. I don't know if that's ordinary, because the trees and stuff that you find that you could cut down with that are there in the first island I found. But the animal to get the resource to make an axe wasn't. So once I did that, though, like these trees you're seeing up in the distance there, it takes 3 swings of an axe to hit that, which takes a bit to do. And then you get 1 piece of wood out of a tree, which is already a little weak. But that doesn't increase your like stick gathering, so you still gather a stick with this like little knife thing that you have. So that takes 2 hits. So imagine like 3 of those to chop down one to get 1 piece of wood, and then, you know, like one part of the ship takes like 5 of those. And here's what I mean with the combat. There's a slow motion thing every time you kill something, and these are like 1-hit kills basically on these things. But it's super slow. And now my weapon's broken, so it's like I can sort of fire off an arrow here or wait for it to kind of stop moving, you know, whatever, to actually hit it. And it serves to take it down, and then you have to, you know, duck down, get the resource out of it, do that, which wouldn't necessarily be a totally bad thing. But then you get into the inventory itself, which you start out with only the 5 items. You eventually get the deal to make another bag that I think has an additional 7 slots, so 14 in total. But for the amount of things you're finding, that's not enough. And then you can really only, up until you find bamboo, which is, again, your mileage may vary, but generally like an hour or 2 in, you can't make any real storage on the boat. The one thing you can make holds 3 items. So, you know, not great. And then if you die, you lose your boat entirely as well. And that's even in the story mode. That's not even just the roguelike version, which I'll get into in a bit. But that's in the story mode, and so you lose effectively everything you had that wasn't... You at least don't lose everything in your bag, and you don't regress your progression. You just start at that same... or a new set of islands, because the islands themselves are all procedurally generated as far as I can tell. There may be... like, it seems like each chapter there's more islands to explore. But generally speaking, there's only 3 that you have to go to on each one, because you're getting these 3 towers, and that opens a portal. Then you go to the next chapter, you get a very small bit of story, and then you have the option to spin these shards that you keep finding on a continual upgrade. But those are... they may be set for each chapter, but from what it seems like, they're random, and you can only pick one or the other. The first one I came to, I didn't have enough shards at all to even open it, and there's only the 3 islands. So that one was like, I think they were each like 750 or something, and I'd only found like maybe, I mean, even here in chapter 2, I think I bought one thing, so I maybe have had at most 2,000 of these things. And like I said, you can only pick one upgrade between, which is sort of the roguelike-ish side of this. And again, if you're playing the adventure mode, I guess it is, I guess the real survival mode or whatever, then you would only get the one, and then you just move on. And I think the one I got was like increased bow damage or something, but the other ones were like, I think one was like increased inventory, which would have been huge, and then the other one was a stamina when swimming thing. There's not really been any need to swim other than to get back to the boat, which there's some caveats to the boat as well, which I'll get into in just a minute. But the general like exploring of islands and stuff, also there's, at least up until now, which is I'm about 5 hours into it, they've all kind of been the same. There's like one sort of major creature that you would want resources from, and they respawn eventually, so you can kind of just hang out on an island and do that. But there's usually only one major thing, and then there's like some smaller creatures, usually for like meat and stuff mostly, which there's a hunger meter, which kind of ticks down maybe a little too often. In addition to, your stamina is a little weird too, because you have that yellow bar, but once it goes down, you start degrading your overall stamina until you stop and gain it back, and then at a point you have to eat to gain the rest of it back completely. If that makes sense, like it keeps going down. These are probably the most interesting things I found, are just these little areas that look like people used to live there, but they're also really small, and you get a very small tidbit of like a quote, more or less, of like story, if you want to call it that, and then that's kind of it. Like, there's not really, like, I was hoping for like maybe caves or you know, like a village or something. Like, there's not really, and maybe that's by virtue of the procedural generation of the game. There's not really that. And that's the other thing too, is like it's build saying on the store page like sail as far as the eye can see, and they sort of mean that literally, because it's like there is when you look at the map, there is a closed in section that you can sail in between until you get those towers and then leave and then go to the next set circle of islands that gets built, which again is not necessarily a problem outright. It's just the way that it's implemented here. And like I said, it seems like they get more interesting the farther you go along. I think there's only 5, maybe 6 chapters though to it, as far as I can tell, and I'm already 3 in. Just based on there's like these story murals that fill in, and there's only 5 of them that I can see, so it seems like that might be it. I'm not sure if the game continues after that point, or if you can keep playing after that point. I don't know. I haven't got there yet. I would hope so, but I don't know if there's a lot to do after that point, if you are to get into it. And then that sort of brings me to like the sailing aspect of the game, where it's like the sailing is like you would think, with the way the game is shown and the way it looks, and the way you move around, like that's your primary mobility other than your feet, is like that sailing part should be pretty solid, especially because we've had, I mean, quite a while to sort of look at games in that, you know, genre, especially lately. Like, I mean, you can look at any of the sailing in Assassin's Creed, and it's far better. Again, I'm aware that this team is much smaller, and that's not really the case. But you look at Sea of Thieves, you look at that, especially Sea of Thieves, which is, I would say, probably the most similar control-wise to this, just because you have like a raised lower sail, and then you have a position of the sail, that kind of thing, and then you have wind direction that you can see. The thing with that is, like, once you've upgraded to putting a sail on your boat, you can't row anymore, so you don't. If you're sailing into the wind, which you have to do, like 90% of the time, it feels like you're sailing into the wind, because the closest island you'll see or something when you come out of your portal is like right there, but the wind will be going the exact opposite direction almost every single time. And so at that point, you're like at a dead stop in the ocean. You're sort of waiting on the ocean or the wind to either change or to just go, well, no, I have to go this other direction. But then again, by virtue of the survival nature of the game, or just by like kind of bugs in the movement and stuff. Like there was one part where my ship got fully pulled underwater for what seemed like no reason, and then sped up completely, and then just rammed into a thing, so it was like completely damaged. So then, like, by the time I got out of the port, I was like, well, I really need to repair this thing. But bamboo only spawns on certain islands, and like I said before, you can only sort of get like maybe 5 in maximum from what I've seen on these islands. And so if you built the raft, you can't really repair it all that well, because it takes the same resources, and then that goes into like you're using a lot of resources up until you build a big enough boat to really put a campfire on it. That way you don't have to keep making a campfire every island that you go to, which is what initially you had to do. And the way that it, and that's a little bit of my own error, because but I will say, like, the writing on it was like, oh, it'll you know, this campfire will make do in a storm, or what, yeah, like a small short-lived fire. So the way it's framed is like, oh, well, this thing on the boat isn't going to last, so there's no point to waste the resource on the boat one, because it's not going to stay there. But it turns out it does, and so it's just the way that it's phrased is a little off. And yeah, it's so strange, because it really feels like if you were to put this into early access. I thought it was early access, to be completely honest. When I started playing it, I was like, oh man, this is a really good foundation for this early access game. Like, this is, like, it runs really well, it sounds good, like the gameplay is there, but it's a little stiff and it could use some rework. And if you added more stuff in there, and they may update it, I really hope that they do, because I think the foundation is solid overall, but it needs like a fair bit of tweaking and a good bit of content added to it to make it like really feel like a fleshed out solid title, especially at a $30 price point, if that's what you're getting in at. I don't know that content is there at that price, just by virtue of, oh, and the one scene here, something that happened too. I got all 3 of those at once. I was like, nice, I don't have to, you know, run around and do the combat. And then they all just disappeared. They were just gone completely. So I was like, well, even when you do well, it's still like not in service of letting you do that. You do find, like, there's not like statistics, I don't think, or at least they're all under the hood. They don't show you that, but there's like 3 or 4 different bows, and they sort of, one is like a long range, one is like a short, something else. But that's the other thing, is like all the equipment stuff is also a part of your inventory as a whole. There's not like, you don't equip things in a separate menu. So that takes up inventory space too, which is another sort of downside. And I know this is kind of like, again, I'm kind of all over the place with this, but that's sort of, I think, because the game itself is kind of all over the place. I'm like, you know, most games there's like, you know, a few things you can go, this is really good, this is really bad, you know, they're very specific. But this one is like, it's so many small things that just stack up to be a not very fulfilling experience. But I am enjoying it, I think. Like, I want to see what else is out there, like if they do more with it, if there's like, I don't know, maybe the back half of the game really changed it, because like I said, it took about 3.5 hours to really open up. But I'm worried that that's because the natural progression of this game is only like maybe 6 hours, and then once you get to the end of it, it would be, you know, like an early stage run in a roguelike, more or less. It's like you, like, especially when those are in early access, it's like you get to the point of the content they have there so far, and you go, okay, well, I'll wait for the next update. But here we don't know if we're getting that, because it doesn't bill itself as an early access game. It bills itself as this is finished. And especially with it launching on the Switch, that says even more to the point of like, this is a finished product. And if that is the case, then it's I think overall pretty disappointing. Especially because it's just because I think everyone sees the potential. I know, and again, I think that's an issue, a detriment to them, by making a game that looks and kind of plays so similar to like Breath of the Wild, or again Flame in the Flood, or Horizon, or these games that it's all pulling from, or like Wind Waker or something like that, where it's just like there's all these possibilities there. Or you look at like Grounded, which is obviously like a much more seasoned team, but like but it's also like a survival crafting sort of thing set in its own kind of world and design and stuff. And you see that game and it's like, yeah, it's definitely in the early stages, but it's early access for sure. And it feels like they're at a similar point, those two games, although I would say Grounded is way more polished and put together. This not to say this game isn't polished. It's just it's not like, it runs super well. I mean, the sound is good, it looks good, all that. Like, I've had no real performance issues by any means. It's all just mechanical issues altogether. But again, like I said, if you saw this as an early access game, you go, oh great, I can't wait to see what they do with this. This is a cool start. But again, as it being, as far as I can tell, a finished product, it's super disappointing. I think if you found this game for, and especially at the price again, like if you found this at maybe 10 to 15, I think you can get some enjoyment out of it for sure. But at $30, it's a really big ask for what seems like is here. And then I'll touch briefly on the roguelike side of things, but it's basically the same setup with the exception of you die and you lose everything but your held items, which I think I said at a beginning, and you lose all your story progression and everything too. So again, it's like, I don't know, this game is really struggling, I think, to find its footing on what it is as a game, like what it wants to be, what it's trying to do, and all that stuff. And I think it's pretty upsetting because I think overall the game is cool and I think it has a ton of potential, and hopefully they keep updating it and adding stuff to it. And especially if they could just tweak a few things mechanically, that would be a big thing. To you know, just adjust some of the parts of it, because again, the foundation is solid. It just needs a lot of tweaks, and I hope they do that, and I hope they add some more content and some different areas to find, or you know, maybe lean harder into the roguelike side of it. And so you can, like, if you were opening chests and finding random like ship parts to put on there, like, oh, that would be cool. Because that's another thing too with like the crafting of the ship, is like it's all set specific parts in specific areas. Like it's like you have a pontoon here, here, or here, and then when you have like a chest, it's like you can only build one in this spot or this spot. That's it. And then if you've built two chests, you can't build like a campfire now on that what you've got set up. And it's just like, yeah, it's just very limited overall for a crafting survival thing. But I think that, again, the potential is there. I'm going to try and stop repeating myself, but I think the potential is there, and I hope they do something with it, but we'll see. So thanks everybody for watching. As always, if you have any games you want me to play, leave it in the comments. If you have any suggestions, comments, or opinions on this game, leave it in there also. But until the next time, I will see you all later.